Welcome, my friends, to Woke Minds with the Wizard of LA. My name's Cenzi, and I'm a wizard. This episode is entitled How to End Your Suffering, Part 2, Letting Go. So let's begin by talking about the prime cause of suffering, and that being attachment. Whether that attachment is to something that is desired and not possessed, or an attachment to a position where there is a fear of loss of something, we can see that this clinging anxiety, this feeling of wanting to have something or to be away from something, is a fundamental suspect in the state of suffering, that it is there and ever present, that there's a longing, a craving, or a fear, a type of aversion of wanting to get away. And this can be incredibly challenging. And it's often linked to an expectation that we have as to how our lives or our realities should function. And even that expectation is often linked to something else that was given to us. Maybe it is the expectation of our peers, or our parents, or our friends, or our spouse, or our bosses, or our children. It doesn't matter, because at the point that you take on someone else's expectation, you put yourself in the place of potential suffering, especially if you are not aligned with that expectation. And we see this so easily when people commit to actions that they're not actually invested in. They do it because they think it's expected of them to do it, and that they will suffer if they don't do it. Perhaps they'll suffer socially and lose standing. Perhaps they will suffer financially because it involves giving with no thought of reward. Perhaps they think that they will lose a type of power by showing compassion or mercy. It can be a variety of reasons why. Though at the point that you can know what value you have in the world and what values are important to you, that what really matters to you, when you know what this is, it is easier to sort out what is not important to you. The types of expectations and ideas and cravings and fears that didn't belong to you at all. They were implanted, or they were expected through others. And there is this bright moment of realization that occurs. And it is a type of liberation and a type of freedom when those expectations, those fears, those cravings that are not actually yours are recognized as such and let go. And this is a beautiful, wonderful thing, because it is a breeze of fresh air that blows through your house. And it is a type of unburdening of your soul, when you can let go of the things that do not actually matter to your path and purpose of being here. And that involves recognizing and knowing what is actually important to you. And it's fine and well to respect that these things could be important to others. Everyone is on their path. Everyone is taking their own steps, having their own challenges, their own loves, their own missions here. You only need be concerned with your own. So when we examine some of the ways that people suffer through things like comparison, comparing your own beauty or intelligence or success to others, is ultimately a loser's game, because there is always someone that is better at one thing or another. You can't win that game. It's scalable, meaning each time you reach a new level or a plateau, there is somewhere higher or better to be. When most people are living inside of their minds, and they're living this story that they're telling themselves, and sometimes the story can be very painful, and the memory and the way that the mind works can edit and re-edit and re-edit until invariably what is happening is there is a storyline playing, and it's not necessarily what actually happened, though it is the story that has been crafted and refined and changed as it has been accessed from the memory, hauled out, viewed in the theater of the mind, replayed, and then put back again. And this has been seen time and again, and it can be experienced, how the memory can adapt and change. And so it's really noteworthy that how we tell the story of our lives has such vast importance on where it goes, how we live them. Because when we inhabit a character of who we are, who we think we are, how we want to appear, what is acceptable and unacceptable, we are creating a structural framework for our reality. Because if we operate that way, and our values, or lack thereof, are being created in that way, we are effectively tuning in to whatever is going to resonate with the story of us, to the exclusion that everything that does not resonate is not necessarily noticed in the paradigm. And this is the same thing as if you go into a store and you are looking for certain items, and anything that is not an item that you would purchase, you just sort of gloss over. If you notice it at all, it's not a priority to you. And so you may not know enough to read the label or the ingredients that are in that item, or to know any particular details about it, because it's not relevant to your life, and your life, as you believe it, on the egoic level, is this accumulation of experiences that you've had and how you are remembering them, because it may not actually be how it happened. And this is part of the map not being the territory. Because as you craft this narrative for your ego, it has to make sense to you. It has to be in a cohesive story form. And this often plays out in different ways. The victim complex is an incredibly well-developed one in the culture, where in order for someone to assume the story of a victim, things have to be happening a certain way in their life. People have to be cast as villains or antagonists that made them the victim. And when they cannot accomplish something, they have to fit that into the story of being the victim, which makes a very convenient scapegoat for not taking accountability for the decisions that one makes. And this is not to say that there are not people that have been what we would call victimized or be a victim. Only that does not need to define them until they choose to put the flag there and have that be the thing that defines them. And then the story will move all around that. The conqueror, the same. Someone who lives their life in a way that they completely dominate everything that they do, and that is their philosophy. And they have a way to have that make sense in their life so that they can sleep well at night, even if they do things that others would consider to be horrible. They have to have a story that allows them to do it. If they don't have a story that allows them to be congruent in that way, then they will have a type of cognitive dissonance, which is like saying that you have two different viewpoints that conflict with each other, and somehow they have to coexist, and it's a horrible state of suffering. Just the same way that someone can smoke cigarettes and at the same time know or believe that they are unhealthy for them to do it, and yet if they don't quit, why would they continue to do it? That's an example of cognitive dissonance. And that can happen quite often, which is its own state of suffering. And again, it has to do with values, it has to do with expectations. And ultimately, if you want to get out of this position in anything that you're doing, you have to be willing to let go of the story or the expectation or the identity that you crafted for yourself, or the way that you cast others in the drama of your life, so that you can move on. Because if we wanted to look at this in a way where we said, let's imagine that you want to change your life for the better. Let's imagine that you want to heal your life. You want to overcome trauma. You want to feel calm and peaceful inside. You want to feel aligned and resonating with your true values and your purpose. And you ultimately want to feel love, just like anything else, just like anyone else. You want to feel that within yourself, from others, whatever it is. So let's say you want to create this state. In order for you to do that, if you have been in a place where you have continually run this story or this script that is a suffering-based storyline that has to do with the things that happened to you, the things that created the trauma, the things that created the pain and the hurt and the memories. If you go and continually go back in and relive these things in any way with emotional contents at all, you are filling the space that you could otherwise implant this new reality of love and abundance and happiness. It's like traffic. And if you are allowing all these cars in to the lane, there's only so much space there, because the focus of your thoughts and your consciousness and how they translate into the actions and the words you're speaking and how you're living your life, because it is so related into your consciousness, if you are busy putting your energy back into anything to do with those experiences that happened with you, you're just going to continue to hurt yourself. The space that you delegate to units of energy we call thoughts that are based in things that vibrate in lack and fear and scarcity and trauma and all the things that make up how you suffer, how can these new things come in? So you have to let it go. And that's the trick. Because most of you, I believe, know this already. I think you know fundamentally, you get the idea that you have to overcome this somehow. Though how do you overcome it if you're being triggered by it? So what's the recipe? How do you actually get out from under suffering if you are in the state of suffering? The main prescription is how you would let go of any heavy weight, which would be to just drop it and walk. Easier said than done, perhaps. Though it can be done this way. It can be done so simply. In the same way that a smoker can just put a cigarette out and not ever smoke it again the rest of their life, which happens. Really, though, one way we can make this easier on ourselves is to really know what we want. Because at the point that we know what we want, it's easier to eliminate the options of what you don't want. And I'm going to bring food into this as an easy analogy. Because if you are hungry and you want something to eat, and you say, I want Italian food tonight. And you know you want Italian. And you really have a sense for it. Maybe you visualized what you would order at your favorite restaurant or what you would make in your kitchen. Maybe it's a flavor or a taste that you have. And you know what you're after. It becomes much easier to go prepare, eat, and enjoy that meal because you know what you want. Because you know you want Italian, you can eliminate wanting Chinese or Thai food or anything else. Because you already know what you want. So it makes the decision easier for you. And that is ultimately the way you want to accomplish this. Now, the confusion for many people comes in when other people are telling them what they ought to eat or what they think the other ought to eat. Because at that point in time, it is someone else's projection. And sometimes they line up and sometimes they don't. Someone could make a suggestion for a philosophy to live by or a dish to eat, and perhaps you agree with that. And so you have it, or you espouse it. And that's fine and well if it's aligned with you to do that. Though you really need to know if it is or not, if it's coming from you or from someone else, if it really resonates with you. Because that is the thing to be doing. And the decisions become much more apparent that way. Much more apparent. It's easy to know. And this includes everything. Who you spend your time with, what you do, where you go, how your environment is. All of it. It's all related to that. Because when you really have that thing that you love, you're dialed into it. Perhaps you're exploring it. And so you need to get a handle on what exactly it is. Maybe you're in the neighborhood of what your purpose is, and you just want to get more specific, and it's requiring more exploration, more experience. Even then, you can eliminate many things in your life that are not aligned with what that is. And at the point that you can do that, you have ended the suffering of indecision or missing out. And so that's another tactic and another way to find the light to move towards. Though really, when you are in resonance with the thing that you love and you're really feeling it, you enjoy the process. You may make goals. There may even be challenges. Though you enjoy the process because you're doing your true will. You're doing the thing that feels right to you, like it's the thing that you were here to do. And it doesn't have to be the thing that anyone else was here to do. In fact, it would be inaccurate if it was. You are here. You have the ability to only be the best you can. You can be a second best of someone else, or you can be the best you. And even saying something like best denotes that you're not there and that you have lack. And that's a whole other level to really get your head around. So you don't even have to use the word best. Because the truth is, without these expectations from anyone, you're perfect. And while it's said nobody's perfect, you're perfect. The imperfection comes from things that obscure your natural state of perfection. So you can see yourself like a shining diamond in the mud maybe, or the masterpiece sculpture still in the clay. So you can change it and sculpt it. And when we say something like best or better or higher self, what we're really talking about is the direction of unfoldment, or the way that you wish or intend to grow that is in accord with your path. And there are many paths on the mountain. So it's really worth knowing that. That when we come back around to the idea of suffering for an expectation, when you have the idea of the life you want to live, or you think you have a grasp on what reality or what your life ought to be like, and if that picture is not matching up and you're suffering for that, that you can figure out a way to create an intention without being attached to the outcome. And we can talk about this later when we discuss intention and outcomes and the difference between the two. Though basically, the idea to ultimately get out of all suffering is to create within yourself that state of equanimity, which is a state of non-judgment, where you are not assigning a value judgment to anything. And by value judgment, we mean you're not calling something good or bad or positive or negative. You're seeing things in a kind of is field, an isness. The expression "it is what it is," which has become quite common. And interestingly enough, depending on who says it and the tonality that they say it in, the way that they vibrate when they say it, can mean many different things under the surface. Though it's genius if you take the expression for what it actually means. Because what it is telling you is it is what it is. It has a neutral definition to it. It's explaining to you that things simply are. They is. That's it. And so whatever you are going to make of that is going to determine the experience of it. And so that could be happiness, that could be sadness, that could be lack, scarcity, that could be abundance, knowing that there's enough. And the world's run previously on scarcity and lack, dog eat dog, zero-sum game. If there's a winner, there's a loser. These kinds of things. And that is over now. We are moving into a new mode of thought. Consciousness is growing among humanity. And the other end of this spectrum is abundance. And abundance is knowing you have enough. And you've really got to believe it. It's a realization. It's not something you get. It's not in a book. It's an inner knowing. The same way the birds know they will find food or that they will fly. They just know. You can see it in nature everywhere. So, you don't suffer when you're in that place. You don't suffer when you can let go of how you think a thing ought to be. One of the easier ones to do is to let go of it when it comes to the expectation on others. And this is often such an issue among couples or friends who bicker or fight where they attempt to change the other one into what they expect. And in those cases, it's many times a lot of blaming the other, and it's a lot of speaking in absolutes, like always and never, and you don't or you can't, or every time. Those types of language patterns, which are trapping language patterns because they perpetuate. How can anyone change if they're told that they always do something and that's what the belief is? Even as a language that you would use if you wanted to change that individual, assuming that that was even the thought that you would take, you would want to give them the opportunity to change and not trap them in a language pattern. The bigger paradigm beyond any of that is just figuring out what resonates with you. And if that friend or that partner is not in resonance, that you can communicate what your needs are. And listen. Listen and communicate to the other what your individual needs are. Not what you think the other ought to do or how they ought to change. Because at any point in time, you, as a sovereign being, as a self-guided, self-mastered being, can choose to choose another. Well, that scares a lot of people because then they would be suffering from attachment. Or what if they live their whole lives with that person? Or what if they can't imagine continuing without that person because that person does X, Y, or Z for them? So are they staying to avoid suffering and staying at that point? Or do they need to go? It's all suffering, whether they stay or go, if they are attached to that place. So we will continue to speak more about attachment and its significance in Enlightenment philosophy, in will-working arts like magic, and deeper knowledge. Though I want to make sure that I'm clear on non-attachment not being the same as not caring, because it's different. Non-attachment allows one the room to move if things change and do not meet an expectation. And therefore, being non-attached puts you in a place where you don't suffer if it changes. The clinging, the attachment, is where the suffering comes in. So you can want a thing, and you can intend for that thing to be made real. And if it turns out a different way, and you're okay with that, you've managed to be able to do that from a place of being unattached. And that's ultimate freedom, because then you really open options for yourself up. Because oftentimes things can actually turn out better than you expect them to. Because you would have to be able to see far enough down the lane as to why that would be a good thing. And this is why sometimes it's said hindsight is 20/20, because once someone has got far enough down the lane, they can look back and say, well, I'm glad that it happened that way, or I'm glad that I didn't get that other thing because then I could have this thing. And so effectively, all you're doing is allowing for that in the present. Because all these things exist in multiple realities. If you can live in that paradigm and you can believe that, everything is happening, so you really just have to access it. And if you can access it and you can effectively move in the direction of which branch of the tree that you want to inhabit, then you're there and it happens. And this is the goal of the mage at the higher level, to be able to do these things and to be able to create that through the will. Because at the moment you can write your story this way, where you say, I am the creator. I am creating my life, and I am accountable for this. And that means I will make decisions based on where my love is, my true love and life's purpose, regardless of anything else. And I will then take action on these decisions. I will take it from the realm of my imagination where things are born, and I will create evidence in reality for them. And I will continue to do this and make artifacts in the way that is in my true path and life's purpose. And I will be steadfast in this. I will do this in a way that I will craft the reality that I choose to craft, rather than be a victim of circumstance or blame it on luck or an angry sky god or any of it. That we can stand up and become that which we would wish to become, and meet those challenges from a place of love, from a place of not lacking, and saying, I'm up for this. I can do this. Because you can. And it's important to believe that, and it's important to leave the door open for the guests that you want to come in, to gain that abundance, to gain that clarity, to gain those gifts, to actually be happy. And these are all states that can change, and you can cultivate them inside of yourself. Though you have to have that entryway for them to come in. They can walk out in the street in front of your house, and they can walk out there for days. If you do not open the door, they don't get to come in. And if you have your house so filled with junk that they can't get through the door, they can't come in. And that's the part that you have to let go. And not be an emotional hoarder. Have the yard sale, have the giveaway, get rid of it. Thing about getting rid of it, you have to acknowledge it. If you don't acknowledge it, then you could repress it, and it can stay and drive you from the shadows. Make your decisions. Acknowledge it. And forgive yourself and forgive the other. And if you can get that far, if you can just do that, and if it seems so far away, then let the question be to ask yourself, how can I forgive? How can I forgive myself for what I did then? How can I forgive the other for what they did? How can I move on into love, into abundance. How can I do that? Because when you start asking the right questions, that's an opening. That's going to get stuff done. And you can create the intention to ask the right questions and then listen and get that answer. And ask them in a way that's going to empower you. How can you move on? What do you need to let go of? What do you need to work on to fulfill your destiny? What is that destiny? And how does it help? How does it become bigger than yourself? Assistance is key, because this is a cooperative game. And when you can help others find fulfillment, you will feel fulfillment. I have personal experience in this, especially if you're suffering. I think many of you out there that have suffered are wounded healers. And you became healers. Perhaps you wanted to heal yourself, or you were in such a state of trauma and suffering that you simply focused all your energy on helping and healing others to avoid your own darkness. And either way, it's a wounded healer. And at the moment you can attend to that and balance it so that you can receive and give, so that you can forgive. You can get into alignment. I believe it's possible. Let the guest in and let go of what you don't need. And so I'm going to create the intention now. And if you'd like to join me in sharing this intention, my friends, it is that you can let go of the weight and the things that no longer serve you on your path and purpose to fulfill your true will, your life, your destiny, that you can let it go. And I create that intention with you. And what's more, that you can find your love and move towards that love. Find your love and move towards that love and embrace it. And reorder your life however it needs to be to put you in alignment with that. And be willing to let go of the stories that you told yourself, because you're more than those stories. They're old stories. You're new in every moment. You are reborn in every possible reality. You are reborn. And take comfort in that. And find equanimity, the place of non-judgment. Thank you, my friends. If the information in this podcast has been beneficial or helpful to you in any way, if you've gained any insight, clarity, wisdom, or blessings from it, I invite you to help it grow by liking, sharing, subscribing to my channel, or you can make a financial contribution through my PayPal, thewizardofla@gmail.com is the address for that. Please leave a comment, feedback, share. And if you're in the Los Angeles area and you'd like to come and participate in some of my special events, find me on my Facebook page at the Wizard of LA 93. Thank you for listening to Woke Minds with the Wizard of LA. And remember to keep warm, sir.